Jonathan mentioned this morning about superheroes, and I am so excited. These are three of my favorite superheroes because they are some younger leaders that are choosing to lead in areas with primarily an older population. So we've just got some interesting numbers up here for you to look at and to kind of understand the counties that they are working in and making a difference in. And so I'm not going to read those numbers. I think you can all see them. But I am going to let this panel introduce themselves. And as they do that, and Jeremy, I think we'll start with you, just FYI. Okay, so you can be prepared.
I'm ready.
All right, okay. So what I would like you to answer as you introduce yourself is tell us first who you are, of course, what you're working on in your community, how you came into that role, and what motivated you?
Jeremy Walther. I grew up in Kerrville, and like many of us who grew, and there's some Kerrville faces in here as well, and so they can attest to this. I did the same thing that my wife did, who also grew up in Kerrville, and both of my brothers. When you graduate Tivy High School, you leave Kerrville, and many of us go to the cities, San Antonio, Austin, beyond. So we eventually kind of migrated back to Kerrville for different reasons, and we started a brew pub in Kerrville. And the intent of that brew pub was to use craft beer, locally sourced food, and an inclusive environment to build community in our hometown. That's a model that's used often in a lot of communities around the country. And I'd like to think because that was the intent of that business. In the 5 years that we've been operating, the spin-off projects that have happened through that business because of the intent of building community are the ones that I'm most proud of. So we've started 2 or 3 different nonprofits. We were helpful in creating the Kerrville Farmers Market, bringing it downtown. Another nonprofit called the Kerrville Urban Trail System, which promotes walkability, better access to natural resources, alternative transportation, public art, just community engagement in Kerrville. And then also Big Seed, which is a nonprofit that helps provide opportunities for young, creative people in Kerrville. And so that's what I do, and that's what motivates me to be back home in Kerrville. And
Perfect.
And that's it.
Yeah, that answered all the questions. Great job. All right, Candace?
I'm Candace Morrison. I own the Honey Bean Coffee and Tea Company, and I started the Junction Area Farmers Market and the Mason County Farmers Market. I am not a Texas native. I moved to Texas, where my mom's family's from, in 2018, and it was pre-pandemic, started the coffee shop in 2019. And right when COVID hit in 2020, I was watching a community that I had just found myself in and started to love kind of break apart. And it was an election year, it was a pandemic year, and you saw this community, this tight-knit, surrounded by the school, focused in their community, kind of start to turn on each other a little bit, and kind of separate. And I looked at, the people getting coffee in the morning, and I was like, we need a farmer's market. We need to bring it back to the land and the roots and back to our center. So our beautiful Junction City Park is covered by trees. It's on the South Llano River, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And I went to city council, and I said I'd like to start a market. And they very politely and not politely told me to go fly a kite. And so I just got louder, and I stirred the pot. And at the time, I was 23 when I asked for the market. And they granted it in June of 2020 for us to use their space. And I thought we were doing great. We had 10 to 15 vendors, and I was like, this is a market. And this year, we've more than doubled in size, and that's a market. And it's been beautiful to watch grow, and that's what motivates me, is you see your kids playing on the playground, you see your older folks sitting by the trees, you see your families gathering and talking, and they just needed a space. They needed a space to come together. And then we didn't even know how many micro farms were in the area that were waiting to sprout up and bring their goods to market. So that's what I do now, and that's what motivates me.
Awesome. Superheroes, right? Okay, all right. Annabell.
Well, thank you. I'm Annabell McNew, and I am the Executive Director of Texas Hill Country River Region, and we are the destination marketing organization for Uvalde County, so we promote tourism within the county. Tourism is sometimes a scary word in the conservation space, but ultimately it's just sharing the experience of these places and these resources that we love, and I've always been passionate about the rivers and being outdoors and conservation, and so it just sort of made sense for me to also share that and help share that with other people. And so in that same vein, though, we have grown significantly, and that's sort of the constant theme I'm hearing, and growth is, we're not going to stop that, but we can be a part of how that happens. And so one of the things that I've been, and our organization has been very focused on, is working with the community and the stakeholders and having open conversations and really focusing on goals and how that happens and making sure that that growth within the tourism industry and within our communities in Uvalde County and beyond are being mindful of how that growth is happening and sustainable tourism and conservation of our resources that make these places so special.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you. Even in tourism, welcome. All right, so thinking about what it is that you do, and you each do kind of something very, very different. So what challenges do you face in your work? And as you think about those challenges, what strategies, resources, or connections have you depended on to overcome those challenges? And Candace, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Biggest challenge is, I would say, probably our city leaders. Our median age is 52, and that's very reflected in our leadership. But my resources are really allies, people in the community that will back me up. So when we needed approval for 2021 to get off the ground, we had about 45 people from the community pack the city hall. And so those type of people that will actually get out there and represent what they stand for. Allies like Bill Neiman, who has been a huge advocator of the farmers market and what it stands for. So challenges are definitely our city leaders. The allies help, and just not shutting up. I'm sure I'm really not the favorite person to our junction leaders, but the community has made it all worth it.
Thanks. I love that 45 people packed the city hall.
It was beautiful.
That's my kind of rural folks. I love that. All right, Jeremy, you want to talk to us a little bit about your challenges and solutions?
Sure. I think when you see an issue in your community, you want to take it head on. If you have youthful energy and ambition and passion to really make a difference. And a lot of times in rural communities, just the culture, the culture of those places doesn't really respond very well to direct confrontation. This is why we speak the way we do. We tend to speak slower. We tend to start conversations about the weather to slowly get around to things that actually matter, right? And so coming from a high-paced place where there was something new happening every day, and then coming back home, it took me a while to kind of slow that down. And I got very frustrated with city leaders who did not move at the pace that we all want them to move, but realized that the most effective way to get things done is to find the backdoor ways and to eliminate any labels, especially political labels, so that no one sees you as an enemy before you even say a word or take an action. So that's been very helpful in all of the work that folks are doing in Kerrville.
Awesome. Thanks. Annabell?
I think, I would say a lot of that also, but one of our challenges is just really having the time to have those conversations with everyone, and everybody, it's easy to get stuck in the busyness of the day-to-day and the short term, and so it's, I think generally our values are very similar, but it's kind of getting to that point where we find that those similarities and perspectives, and so it's, I struggle with being able to have those in-depth conversations and reminding stakeholders in the community about kind of the value of what we're doing and the long term and the importance of kind of protecting the culture and the character and the natural resources for the long term. So it's just communicating and finding that time and those common grounds. So.
Perfect. All right, so let's talk specifically about age for just a moment. Not my age, your age. So as you see, the rural communities tend to be older than the general demographics of the state even, except for Uvalde. Uvalde's kind of an outlier in there. I wouldn't really want to talk about that. But just wondering, have you felt like your younger age has helped you, hindered your ability to lead in your communities? And how has that been for you? Do you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Awesome. All right, let's do it.
First of all, I'm just really flattered to be classified in this younger group, especially given the median age of Uvalde County. But I will say that is kind of an outlier because what I do is specifically the smaller rural communities outside of the city of Uvalde, and the city of Uvalde, these demographics are probably more reflective of the junior college and the city of Uvalde itself. And so the stakeholders that I deal with and work with are not 34. But I do think that my age, it has helped in kind of bringing a new energy and kind of, I'm not quite as young as some others, so I can probably more easily communicate and kind of translate and go back and forth between different age groups. And
let me ask you real quick, thinking about your civic leaders, do you find the Uvalde leaders civically to be younger, older? Are they representative of this demographic?
They're older, so most of them. So I think we're kind of in line practically with everyone else, with these other communities. So, but yeah, they've...
Great, thanks. All right, Candace?
I would say both. I think it's definitely helped a lot. Farmers markets take a lot of energy. They take a lot of really early mornings and a lot of late nights. So in that perspective, yes, it's been great. And it's helped reaching out to a ton of people on a weekly basis. I will say new vendors, when they show up to the market and we've only communicated via email or text or phone conversations, I get a lot of the, "Oh, you're Candace." Or they'll look around and they're like, "Where's Candace?" And I'm like, "I'm Candace." So they're looking for that person that they would think has a little bit more authority. And it has hindered. It hinders trying to get a space at the table in leadership meetings. The EDC has been super open, but some other organizations don't really welcome a young seat at the table, which would be amazing because just because we have older representatives, they've solved problems for all these years. They know the systems, they know the loopholes, they know the regulations that we need to see. And someone walking into the space that says, "Hey, I have an idea, let's do it," I need to know the barriers of entry. And they know the barriers of entry. So to have a space at that table and learn and glean and have that mentorship-like system in our leadership would be amazing. It's just not there yet.
Great, thanks.
During the last local election cycle in Kerrville for city council, someone ran, and this is the kind of guy that wears a tie and a suit. He's very clever. He's very he educates himself on going into the weeds and really digging into stuff. And he was elected, and he's a 19-year-old homeschooler who still lives with his parents. And so, I think that Kerrville does tend to have. I always joke that it's the place where people go to die, because it's, especially growing up there, it does feel that way, where the entire energy of the space is all about nursing homes and protecting your little nest egg and making sure no one is even looking at it. So, but really, in the last, I've seen it 5 to 10 years. I think the culture of Kerrville has realized that it's not really sustainable. And so I personally have not seen any barriers of any young people in Kerrville. It's the people that act like children that have the barrier set up more than their actual age, which is very fortunate. So I think Kerrville is an anomaly as well. We are very rural. We definitely have agricultural roots, but we've always operated. And this is back, 1940s, 1950s, Kerrville was the wool and mohair capital of the world. And so Kerrville was known around the world for this product that was distributed all over the place. And so even though it's rural, it operates very similar to a small city. And so the label for Kerrville is micropolis. And so, when we look at, ways to grow smart, Troy had mentioned, every community needs to first identify its goals before you can come up with solutions. But before you even know what the goals are, you kind of have to know what your qualities are. You have to define those qualities so that you know what you're protecting and what you're preserving. And if the community is doing all of those things together, defining, protecting, and developing smartly, then we all have kind of these similar qualities that we're all celebrating together. And that's when Candace is talking about the farmers market. I think those 300 or 400 people in Little Junction that show up to that weekly market are there for a social event, but deep down, they really are celebrating qualities of Junction that make it special. And it's their local food and, ranchers and farmers. It's also the fact that it's on the Llano River, which is a big part of Junction. And so it's those events, to really discover those events and really promote those events and support those events. We're all truly celebrating the qualities that make our own communities special.
That's great. This is just one example of the conversations that we have with Leading in the Rural Hill Country, a virtual event that we host in partnership with Hill Country Alliance about once a quarter. And we have a steering committee that helps us do that, and there are a couple of members of the steering committee here today. So thank you for being a part of that to help make these conversations happen. All right, so in the next 10 to 15 years, which, Candace, is like half your lifespan. How would you like to see your community change, and what about it would you like to see stay the same? I know I feel like I'm picking on you, but thanks.
No, it's great. Junction's very much a hunting town, and it survives on tourism. But I want to see that stay the same. Without our hunting, we would have no native grasses. We're overrun with a lot of deer and wildlife, which is great in moderation. So that I'd like to see stay the same. But there's been a shift in the last 3 to 5 years that I hope truly blooms. Junction is a beautiful place to be such an outdoor retreat. We have the South Llano River State Park there. You have the South Llano and the North Llano River. We have the dark skies. We're in the pathway for the total eclipse. There's a lot of assets that could be capitalized on. And what we've seen recently is the up and back kayak race, the triathlon that's coming to Junction. You're getting more 5Ks and the Love Hurts triathlon and different outdoor events that are starting to pop up. That would be amazing if we grew into that, to be an outdoors town, to be a place where people come to escape the cities and really connect with our natural resources. And we've started the baby steps, and I'd really love to see it grow into that.
That's great. I love to hear you talk about Junction. That's awesome. Annabell, I'm real curious about your answer on this, thinking about 15 years from now, Uvalde, and tourism and change, and yeah, that's just like, oh, that's an exciting topic for you. I want to hear about it.
It is. I kind of big picture would just really like to see visitors and also stakeholders, but really take ownership of the destination and of the natural resources in keeping those, enjoying them, and also preserving and conserving them. And so we are working diligently on a lot of experiences and educational opportunities to educate visitors. We have a tremendous amount of generational visitation, and that's wonderful. And all those families that have been coming year after year, they are so take great pride in keeping the rivers clean. But I'd like to see that for new visitors as well. Take that same pride and ownership and enjoying and taking care of the destination. So.
That's great. Jeremy, talk to me about Kerrville.
In 10 to 15 years, it'll be a little city that is full of opportunity for everyone, for a diversity of people, ages, classes, races, but also still feels like a small town near the headwaters of the Guadalupe River. That's the vision for Kerrville in 15 years. Can we do it?
Yeah, absolutely. The H.E. Butt Foundation has their administrative offices there, so we have a little bit of reason for wanting that to be the case. So thanks for that. Okay, so I think we've got, 3 minutes left? All right, 3 minutes. Any last words that you want to leave with our group, and then maybe we'll have time for one question. Oh, now you get quiet. Okay, no last word. I mean, the last words you just gave were pretty awesome. So it's kind of...
I will say this. I mean, I think Candace and I have actually met each other before through the work that Candace is doing in Junction and the work I'm doing in Kerrville. And so we can probably all attest to this, that living in places like Kerrville and especially Junction can be a very, very lonely experience. And one thing that I've had to learn pretty quickly is to use that loneliness as a superpower. But when you do that, and then you finally do connect to those kindred spirits that are also working on, similar issues that kind of see the world the way that you do. I mean, that's a powerful connection. I mean, those kind of connections are where God lives. And so it's events like this in these really beautiful, thoughtful settings that really foster those kind of connections. And I'm just so glad to be a part of it, and glad for all of the work that everyone, sometimes very quietly, very quietly does in their community. But I always enjoy a new opportunity to meet those folks that are doing that work. So thank you.
Thanks. Do we have time for a question? One question, anybody?
I don't know if Candace is going to run for city council.
Candace, the question is, are you running for city council?
Well, there is a spot open.
Okay, all right, so Junction folks.
It's coming up.
Some young leaders that maybe aren't still living with their parents. I don't know. All right, well, thanks, Hill Country Alliance, and I'm going to hand this over to Cliff. Oh, Cliff has a question. Okay.
It's a softball for Jeremy. I don't think you mentioned the name of your business in Kerrville, but if folks want to visit.
It's called Pint and Plow Brewing Company in downtown Kerrville.
And Pint and Plow donates a keg. We have 2 kegs. One we buy. Pint and Plow donates the other one to our free beer events at the farmers market that happen 4 times a year. And Oktoberfest is October 16th, so y'all should come out.
Thanks, everybody.